China's trade ministry says Beijing will not sit back and watch if Washington harms bilateral trade ties. The remark comes after President Trump authorized an investigation into China's intellectual property policies. The probe will focus on whether Beijing is focusing and forcing the U.S. firms to hand over intellectual property in order to do business in the country. The outcome of the investigation, set to take around a year, could lead to tariffs on Chinese products. Beijing's spokesman said the U.S. should treasure the current favorable state of trade ties and should disregard objective facts and the principles of the multinationalism in any action that harms trade and businesses. China would adopt all appropriate measures to.
What does this mean for South Korea? Is South Korea getting ever more safer, or South Korea is actually ever more dangerous, even though Pyongyang and Washington began to fight verbally?
South Korean public, we have been pretty much familiar with all this series of provocative wording from Pyongyang. So this is not actually our first time, to listen to this kind of very stimulating wording from the Pyongyang. But probably this might be remembered as our first time to listen to this kind of stimulating word, another like exchange of stimulating words between the Pyongyang and Washington now. But so far, it looks like, again, the Seoul looks pretty much stable, or people are trying to be more like, how would you say, stable intentionally, because we do remember 20 years ago in 1994 when the first nuclear crisis did occur. Most of us really did panic, but we learned something, I think, from that historic moment. So it looks like now we are trying to be more rational as of now.
But Mr. Polak, will the U.S., that's a big question mark, if North Korea under threat to the extent that they think the real danger is there, they might not strike the United States, even though they threaten to. They might just strike their neighbors, as they earlier claimed as well. So does South Korea and also probably Japan face the danger?
I think, frankly, South Korea and Japan face the potential dangers much more than the United States. I think, although there is understandable concern in many places in the United States about the possibility that North Korea will ultimately possess an operational nuclear weapon that can reach the United States, the real dangers right now are on the peninsula and in the immediate region, not against the United States. I don't want to call the exchange of threats between the U.S. and North Korea just to be a game, but the realities are that the dangers are very physically concentrated in Northeast Asia, and that needs to be the real focus of concern. In my view, and I think that frankly should be the real focus of concern of American policymakers.
So is China concerned if its own security is being threatened as a result of these rhetorical words, at this stage at least?
Well, actually, China's national security has been threatening more and more seriously with the escalation of the danger of war on the peninsula, although I firmly believe the war is not immediate at all. The problem or the danger is the escalation of the further test will trigger the escalation of military preparedness and the political consultations between Washington and Seoul. Now, fortunately, Seoul and Washington haven't reached the consensus about the military action. If the situation reaches that point, that would be a real danger of war, and the spillover of the war effect will certainly damage all of the surrounding nations, including China.
Can China do anything to avoid a possible war, even possible military conflict based on unreasonable analysis of the reality?
Unfortunately, there's no any effective way for China or tool or leverage in China's hand to prevent the war from happening I mean, the war either between the two Koreas or the war between North Korea and U.S. participated by the South Korea. No leverage. However, the only way for China available is to bring about the negotiation solution, negotiated solution, a peaceful solution to the nuclear issue,
Okay,
to
having
diffuse
said
the danger.
Having said that, then let me just read a quote coming from the Chinese Foreign Minister, Wang Yi. He said this after the UN Security Council reached a resolution further doing economic sanctions against the DPRK. Foreign Minister Wang from China, Mr. Wang Yi said, "We are entering a critical phase on the situation in the Korean Peninsula after the resolution is passed." So, Ms. Lim, with the UN Security Council resolution, we know it's not the ultimate solution. We all know that. We're not naive, right? But is it going to be a window opportunity considered by all parties? Or is it going to be wasted by parties involved as a window toward the future, further and bigger tensions?
Yes, of course. To some degree, I share a kind of critical observation with people who are really critical or pessimistic about the effectiveness of sanctions. But still, the meaning of this collective action, I don't think it is meaningless because, again, from the history, what you learn is, again, the North Korea was always, trying to play with its different cards. So whenever we show some gaps actually between us, if so, it can be a good opportunity for them actually to manipulate those gaps. So in that sense, I do see this kind of collective action of the international society is really meaningful because we really need to show that, that we do have a strong collective will, which is, again, against their nuclear armament.
Mr. Polak, what about for you? For your analysis of what has followed after UN Security Council resolution, remember President Trump was claiming it as a big victory. Okay, a big victory for what? A big victory for next steps to be taken in order to prevent further crisis. But have we seen those steps?
Well, President Trump is often a very, very impatient individual. He seems to expect instant results and the like. And if those of us, like all the people on this show, know very, very well that these are very protracted issues. They don't admit to easy solution. But I would agree very much with Professor Lin that we, by creating a unified position, at least on paper, and uniform obligations that all those who signed the latest Security Council resolution have, we can, over a longer period of time, not immediately, really affect how North Korea approaches its interests and what it does. I don't think that any of us have effective control over North Korea. I think one of the biggest misconceptions among American thinkers, some American officials, is that somehow China has the hidden key to this. That's not my reading of the situation, but the last thing any of us should want is to find us in a situation of inadvertent or undesirable conflict. War avoidance has to be the utmost priority.
Washington elites take President Trump as a target for failing to come up with policies even regarding North Korea. But we have to ask, what have the apparatus, the machines in Washington come up with when it comes to solutions to deal with North Korea? It's not just President Trump's voice. There's also Secretary of State. There's also the Defense Secretary. There's also the Congress. There's also think tanks in Washington. So what have you come up with? Can you all blame President Trump for where the current situation is. Can you all blame President Trump as an individual for lack of plan coming from the United States? Can United States put itself together to somewhat degree, come up with something, do something?
Well, first things first, I'm not going to blame President Trump for this situation that has emerged over a very long period of time. I am, however, holding him accountable for the words that he uses now, which could needlessly trigger worries, concerns that we could be closer to war. Now, again, I agree very much with Yang Xiyu that I do not believe we are on the edge of a conflict, but it's very important to not to make what is a very, very difficult situation that much worse.
Okay.
At the end of the day, I would acknowledge, and I would agree with you, that to talk about a solution here really presumes that there is a compatibility in goals between, let's just say, the United States and North Korea. And that clearly does not exist in any way, shape, or form. But what the United States does share with other powers, including China, is a belief that there can never be an acceptance of the legitimacy of the North Koreans pursuing a nuclear weapons capability.
So what's next, Mr. Yang? What's next is already quite clear to us, some facts at least. Before North Korea does anything, we are already seeing ever more divide among the countries in Northeast Asia. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. Actually, now the key words is how. We have a complex of differences and contradictions, not only between U.S. and North Korea, among every party between. And the key word is how. And how the international community, for example, how the 5 countries in the SIG party talks to act coordinately or cooperatively or differently. That will lead to different direction. I think that is the core meaning of the window of X. Window of opportunity you mentioned, or window of new round of conflicts leading to uncontrollable war. So for the ideal result, we hope we need to have a coordinated and cooperative actions, at least among the 5, based on several fundamental consensus. For example, number 1, what is the key words of the solution of the complex nuclear issue? Maybe American friends say, very simple, denuclearize North Korea, that's it. But for China's way, maybe a little bit complex, say, besides denuclearize North Korea, we want to bring about the denuclearization of the whole peninsula, and as well completely, fairly address North Korea's legitimate concerns in diplomacy and security and economy.
That's what China say, freeze for proposal.
Oh yes, and we have made a consensus in the 19 joint statement, say commitment to commitment and action to action, addressing fairly the concerns.
Professor Lim, what do you think about the Chinese proposal? Can the South Koreans come ever closer to that proposal? Will South Korea be able to convince the United States to come closer to that proposal?
THAAD deployment, absolutely, it has been controversial, or even that kind of joint exercise. Some more like radical people have been like a negative or pessimistic about, critical about that too. But our general understandings about the THAAD and about our joint exercise with the United States is our legal right, I mean, for our defense. It's not, again, offense against North Korea. That's our, again, the general understanding. And it's only for our defense purposes. So in that sense, I mean, as you said, like freeze for freeze, or that kind of, more like equivalent exchange between the two. But generally, again, Korean public don't think the THAAD issue is that equivalently, correspondingly provocative or offensive move against the North, like their nuclear, that kind of ambition.
Mr. Yang, perception very different. Very quickly to respond from your South Korean counterpart, Mr. Yang.
Well, I think SAD issue, nuclear issue, and nuclear and ICBM issue on the peninsula, for China's point of view, a complex issue. We cannot separate all of the stuff, items from each other. And the problem is, in China's view, during the past 2 decades, both North and South Korea are engaging the arms race by addition with addition, adding North Korea's military capabilities and adding South Korean military. And as a result, our host Tianbei mentioned, are we safer than before? North Korea and South Korea are safer than before? Absolutely no. And as well, you are unsafer than before, and we are unsafer than before either, because of the complex escalation of the tensions on the peninsula. So we need to change our mindset, and we need to re-explore the new way towards the peaceful solution.
I'm having a long sigh as well before we wrap it up, but I want to have one very simple sentence from every one of you. What would this mean for our Northeast Asia? One sentence and one sentence only, briefly. Professor Junjun Lim.
Again, I can agree more with Mr. Yang and with Mr. Polak. Here we refers to 5 party, minus again the North Korea out of the 6. So this at least 3. If it is impossible to get a kind of consensus among 5, at least 3, China, U.S., and South Korea, we have to get a consensus before actually we move on to another action.
One sentence. Jonathan Polak, your turn.
The deeper issue here, in my view, is not only the immediate nuclear issue, but the very character of the North Korean political system, and the fact that, unlike all of its neighbors, it is not interested in genuine engagement, genuine economic advancement, and normal relations with others.
The Chinese military stands ready to engage in common efforts with the U.S. military to enhance strategic communication, boost mutual trust, and deepen pragmatic cooperation. We can handle our differences in an appropriate manner and effectively manage risks, so as to promote our military development in a stable and sustainable way.